Watch right now on the Front News Project. Footage of real combat. The column of the 155th Brigade of the Russian Federation has been destroyed in Kurchina. The red flags of the USSR didn't help. The battle for Toretsk continues. Unique video from scratch. Strike on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Putin is provoking a new planetary scale catastrophe. Fiery, hot, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now. The bloody war continues. The war that Vladimir Putin and his pack have unleashed on Ukrainian soil, the heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people continues in their fight for freedom. Greetings. This but is Front News. This is Vladimir Timoshenko with you. In the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war, which our journalists are gathering from the hottest battle zones. So, are you ready? Then let's get started. And we start right away with exclusive material. The Ukrainian armed forces have managed to slow down the enemy's advance in the Toretsk area, although the lying Russian Ministry of Murder, also known as the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, has already reported 3 times about the capture of the city. Another good piece of news? Under the same Toretsk, the Azov Brigade is already actively using Western weapons. Although for 10 years straight, until the middle of last year, the Azov fighters didn't have such an opportunity. Military correspondent of TSN, Andrei Saplienko, has returned from the front lines and knows exactly the chances of holding the defense line. In Toretsk, there is exclusive material for your attention.
After Trump's statements, after Trump's announcement about a future meeting with the Russian dictator and war criminal Putin, not much has changed here in the Toretsk direction, at least for the Azov Brigade. The Russian infantry is advancing and the brigade fighters are stopping them, and for now they have the means to do so. Finally, Azov has started receiving powerful Western equipment. In particular, these probably the newest artillery systems in the world, the Dita. The fresh Czech Dita guns made last year have significantly increased the capabilities of the Azov Brigade. If necessary, she will reach the enemy deep inside, in the rear, 39 kilometers away. To this position, almost everything is done automatically, from loading to targeting.
It aims itself, so the entire loading system is automated. It also approaches the firing position automatically. You only need to press the fire button mechanically.
Dita can fire several shells on different trajectories, but in such a way that they hit the same target almost simultaneously. So there's no escaping it. The main advantages over Russian artillery are accuracy, range, and speed. This makes the Czech system an indispensable element of counter-battery warfare. But counter-battery warfare in Toretsk is not just about hunting enemy guns. Right now, the fighters are trying to stop the advance of the Russian infantry. To do this, it's necessary to neutralize the drone control point that covers the advance of the enemy infantry.
It hit the target area from where they launch.
The Ukrainian group in the Toretsk area is currently acting as a single mechanism that grinds down the enemy, while the latter has claimed several times that they have taken Toretsk. Russian occupiers even climbed to the top of the Toretsk mine to raise the tricolor flag over it, but Ukrainian artillery interrupted the Russian mission with several precise strikes. The FPV drone shot down a tricolor rag. Next, the 28th Brigade, with the support of the 2nd Battalion of the Kolodny Yar fighters, raised our blue and yellow flag on a tall structure. But Russian commanders continued to send disposable soldiers with new tricolors for media videos.
Raise the flag. We need to show that we really have taken Toretsk. Our flags are there. No, that's not true. Toretsk is under us. Part of it is under us. We are currently fighting for it and will continue to fight.
Toretsk is one of the priorities of the Russian offensive. Despite all the statements from the Russian Ministry of Defense, the enemy hasn't taken it, but they have effectively divided the city in half, capturing its central part.
We're currently holding about 50%, maybe just a little less. Maybe 1 or 2 people are sneaking into our rear, and the enemy reports that they have taken everything, saying, "We have taken the mine figuratively," or "We have taken Toretsk because there are 2 of our guys on the outskirts." But we are currently in the center, and the fact that 2 people have slipped through is temporary. We'll kill them no matter what, if not tomorrow then the day after, but that's 100%.
In small groups, the occupiers are trying to infiltrate between the positions of the Ukrainian forces in the Toretsk area. Sometimes they succeed, but most of these groups are suicide squads.
Mostly, it's reconnaissance. Alive and conditionally from a group of 18 people, theoretically only 2 survive, who just relay some movements or any information.
This wounded occupier chose life and is crawling on his knees to surrender to the positions of the Azov Brigade.
He just crawls into the basement and says, I don't understand why this war is even necessary. So why did you come here if you don't understand why this war is necessary? Patronymic.
A Russian was brought out by an Azov drone.
Then your drone stopped and dropped me some water. He kind of says, drink, like, don't be afraid, it's not poisoned. They were talking to me directly through the drone. With a speaker, yes, I drank. He says, you will surrender. I drank, if you will raise your left hand. I raised my left hand.
The drone saved the occupier's life because his own people wanted to eliminate him.
And there he is. When he saw our drones, he said, pretend it's 200. I pretended that they were 200. Our drones hovered above me, circled around, and then flew away. Could your drones have finished you off? Yeah, if they give the order, they can really finish you off.
3 stormtroopers survived from his group. Everyone ended up in captivity with the Azov. All 3 were contractors who went with weapons to a foreign country of their own accord. The motive is money.
They just put the whole of Russia into debt. You're saying some really scary things right now, you know. You're talking about your mortgage, which we don't need here at all. You're comparing this to people's lives, you understand. Because of the mortgage, I don't know, because of your criminal record. You killed here. They could have killed.
Behind the front line, the Ukrainian army is building several lines of defense, with bunkers, firing points, and dragon's teeth. If we can't hold the city, they'll fall back here.
Artillerymen work the same way during a withdrawal, and so do the mortarmen. Only then will the infantry actually enter these bunkers. They enter a prepared position, and already under combat operations, the infantryman perfects it to an ideal state.
This is a defense section being built by Azov. Everything, as they say, is classic, but the net above is already a modern improvisation.
The so-called anti-drone protection is designed to prevent drops. If an explosion happens here, then all the debris and shrapnel will scatter above.
This line of defense will slow down the Russians' movement towards Konstantinovka if they manage to capture Toretsk.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the long-suffering Pokrovsk front. The situation here is traditionally tense to the limit. On the Pokrovsk front, there were clashes of varying intensity 14 times today near the settlements. Promen, Pokrovsk, Sergeyevka, Nadeevka, Bogdanovka, Serebryanaya, Andreevka, and Ulakli. One combat encounter is still ongoing. And right now, you will see unique footage of an actual battle in the Kursk region. The armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a column of the 155th Brigade of Russian Marines. Interestingly, the Russians attacked with red flags of the Soviet Union. But as you can understand, that didn't help them. And also, exclusive footage of the destruction of an enemy drone launch point in the Kursk region and the moment the Russian S-350 Vityaz air defense system was destroyed. Its cost, just for a moment, is $135 million. Let's watch all the details.
Ukrainian defense forces destroyed an elite Russian unit in the Kursk region. Russian Marines from the 155th Brigade attempted to storm Ukrainian positions in tanks with red flags of the Soviet Union, but their efforts were successfully thwarted. The fighters of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade Magura, along with other units, repelled a massive assault by the occupiers. Also in the Kursk region, the Ukrainian armed forces destroyed an enemy stronghold from where the Russians were launching drones at Ukraine.
These are serious losses for the Russian army. It should be noted that it is precisely through the use of drones on fiber optics, the Russian occupiers are trying to hold back the advance of Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region, specifically to take control of key locations. Strikes are being carried out both against the personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine and accordingly against heavy armored vehicles.
The occupiers also said goodbye to their new generation air defense systems worth $135 million. In the Donetsk region, scouts from the Black Forest Brigade discovered and destroyed the latest Russian short and medium range air defense system, Stusensen. Because
The air defense system was providing operational cover for the logistics of the Russian occupiers in this direction, and this significantly weakened the capabilities of the occupying forces at the moment of redeploying operational reserves for further advancement deep into Ukrainian territory.
Meanwhile, on the night of February 17th, explosions were heard again in the Krasnodar region.
Here over the settlement flies Pastos.
According to reports from Russian outlets, drones attacked the Ilisky oil refinery. Debris from an allegedly downed drone fell near the oil refinery, causing a fire.
Ilisky oil refinery, its main capacities are designed for processing about 7 million tons of petroleum products. This mainly includes gasoline and diesel fuel, which are used for the logistical needs of the Russian army.
Things are not looking good for the Russians in the Kursk region. Ukrainian forces have destroyed nearly 20,000 Russian occupiers. The North Korean military also suffered heavy losses. This was stated by the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, during his speech at the Munich Security Conference.
Apparently, this concerns North Korean units that are directly integrated into the 150th Marine Brigade and the 155th Marine Brigade. The 150th Marine Brigade, the 810th Marine Brigade, and accordingly the 76th Airborne Division. I would note that out of the total number of North Korean servicemen, which according to the main intelligence directorate amounts to about 12,000 in the Kursk region, approximately 4,000 were directly involved in combat operations.
The president of Ukraine also reported that the situation has improved in the Pokrovsk direction of the front in recent days. According to him, our military feels more confident there. However, he did not disclose any details. It is known that Ukrainian forces liberated the village of Pishane near Pokrovsk.
We can already talk about the complete control of the Ukrainian defense forces over this settlement. Interestingly, on the territory of Pishane, there are some of the largest mines for extracting coking coal to be continued, without which Ukraine's heavy industry will practically be unable to carry out its production activities.
But the situation in the Kurakov direction remains tense. According to some reports, the occupiers are close to cutting off the Andriivsky pocket and may have also captured a pocket in the eastern village of Ulakli near Kurakove in the Donetsk region.
Well then, now it's time to analyze the operational situation at the Novopavlovsk front of the Russian world. And here it continues to destroy, kill, and maim. At the Novopavlovsk front, the aggressor has attacked 10 times in the areas of Konstantinopol, Razdolnoye, and Privolnoye. Currently, there are still 8 clashes ongoing. And also, this week, the Russians carried out a barbaric attack on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. A drone with an explosive payload hit directly into the shelter that protects the 4th reactor of the nuclear power plant. A fire broke out. Rescuers found several damaged sites. All fires have been extinguished. There is no open fire. But let's be honest, this is a real terrorist threat. After all, our shelter was built by our state in collaboration with other countries in Europe and America to save humanity from radiation. And the only ones who can attack and to occupy such facilities despite the possible consequences is exactly what the Russian war criminals do. KTSN correspondent Natalia Nagornaya has already been able to see the aftermath of the strike on the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Her exclusive material follows.
Russia has once again shown itself as a nuclear terrorist state. A Russian drone with an explosive payload, it's now confirmed that it was indeed that, struck the shelter over the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and damaged it. The surveillance cameras show this happened just after 2 o'clock in the morning. Another explosion over the reactor. In the footage, you can clearly see the fire, and in the morning, smoke was rising from the hole in the protective shelter. Once again, firefighters had to extinguish the fire above the 4th reactor.
The insulation between the metal continues to smolder. It needs to be completely extinguished. In order to reach it without completely destroying it, they are making small holes in the sarcophagus under difficult conditions. You can see the very harsh weather conditions for working at heights. They are complicated and some safety measures are being violated. But it needs to be done.
Right now it looks like this. You see these tiny dots? In fact, these are the people who are repairing the huge hole. And perhaps from the ground, it's even impossible to assess this hole. Right now, dozens of my colleagues from various media outlets have gathered here to showcase this act of nuclear terrorism. which Russia has resorted to again. A fire started in Konfirmant, and in fact the state emergency service had to put out this fire again. But the most important thing that is being said right now is that there is no threat, and there is also no radiation leak.
The consequences could have been catastrophic if, say, the drone had hit about 15 meters to the side over the old shelter. There would have been a radiation accident. The situation is under control. At the moment, the situation is under control. No increase in control levels in relation to background radiation at the site was recorded. The background has not changed.
Russian terrorists
regularly terrorize the Chernobyl zone, but the damage to the sarcophagus, the shelter, has happened for the first time. In total, this hole has an area of about 50 square meters. It might seem like no one in Ukraine would be surprised by a Shahed drone, but right now dozens of journalists are filming that very Shahed that flew over the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Here you can see the serial numbers, which we usually don't show, and part of the engine and the remnants of what was once, in fact, a Russian explosive drone. Let the factory workers be. This is one of the fragments of the so-called confinement that fell today after the Shahed arrived. It was built by the whole world, but Russia destroyed it in an instant. This structure was built with the collective efforts of the whole world. This includes Europe, the United States, Canada, and Japan, to protect both nature and people from the dangers of nuclear power. This arch weighs 36,000 tons. It was built and moved. And in our archives, there is a video showing how the day looked. For the day, it covered the previous shelter arch, which was built over 206 days right after the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. This shelter, which Russia has now damaged, cost more than 2 billion euros. But this investment was necessary to protect the world from radiation. The Chernobyl zone has already experienced several acts of Russian nuclear terrorism, starting in fact with in 1986, when it was still under Soviet occupation, the explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant occurred. And during the full-scale invasion, the Chernobyl station was occupied and was under the control of Russian terrorists. 37 days. And if we recall Russian nuclear terrorism, in the fall of 2022, they also struck the South Ukrainian nuclear power plant. They hit it with a missile, but it fell short by several hundred meters from the station itself. I would also like to remind you that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is currently under the control of the occupiers, and this station was also shelled by the Russians. We see how Russia continues to pose a threat to the entire world, and a vivid example is right behind me. Well...
And now let's move to the Kharkiv and Kupiansk directions of the front. A bloody frenzy of the army. The enemy continues. And here, in the Kharkiv direction, the enemy attempted to advance on the defense positions 3 times in the areas of Volchansk and Zapadnoye. One clash. It's still ongoing. In the Kupiansk direction, the enemy is conducting 2 attacks in the area of Zagryzovoy. The fighting, as I say, is still ongoing. Destroyed houses and daily shelling. This is how Zolochev lives, a border town in the Kharkiv region. The Russians are shelling it with everything they have. With guided bombs, artillery, and Grad rockets, residents are forced to spend the night in basements. But despite everything, shops, the post office, and social institutions are still operating there. In a city that has been living under daily shelling for a long time, TSN correspondent Yulia Boyko visited. Let's watch her exclusive.
The morning in Zolochev doesn't start with coffee. Shells scattered across the streets, debris from munitions, craters on the roads. Here, they are used to the silence not lasting long. Here is the physical education and health complex of the Children's and Youth Sports School. Russian aviation attacked the building twice. Last year in May, and now at the beginning of February. Now, it's just ruins.
Until this moment, the dome of the physical education and health complex of the sports school was still intact. The windows, doors, all of this was of course a bit damaged, but the frame itself was intact. At the moment, we can already see that the shell has penetrated through the walls and the floor with debris.
The Russians are targeting the facilities that the community has restored after previous strikes. A dormitory for displaced persons. A prime example. Even before the full-scale war began, it was specially equipped for displaced persons from the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. And in 2022, a strike hit here, and that blow was not the last one. By the end of 2023, the building was completely restored, and new furniture was brought in so that the displaced persons could live here as well. But just 6 months later, the Russians had almost completely destroyed the building. The enemy is hitting the community with everything they can. With FPV drones, artillery, grad rockets, and shells. The residents of Zolochiv no longer count the shelling. The occupiers are specifically targeting residential and social infrastructure. On Christmas Eve, they attacked a residential area. One missile destroyed the entire street. One of the residents was killed. The son was playing. It was never like this before.
The son was playing, the daughter was watching TV, they read that the cub was on gold. But we somehow, basically didn't react to them before, so we believed that it would fall somewhere in the fields, stay with them, but it wouldn't reach us. But unfortunately, it flew to us.
Now, as soon as the alarm sounds, everyone goes to the basements.
We're sitting behind these doors with our supplies and everything, over there, all the way over there. How often do you have to go down to the shelter?
They scream there. Well, often.
Often, almost every day. After it hit here, it's scary now.
However, despite this, Larissa doesn't want to leave.
The thing is, we've already gotten used to it here. Despite the difficulties, no matter what, we have gas, we have water, and we have food. So that's all we have for now. As long as they don't shoot, don't bang, and we don't have to hide in the basement.
Before the full-scale invasion, there were 28,000 people living in Zolochiv. Right now, only 20,000 are left. Before the shelling, a couple lived in this house who had just bought it. But after the explosion, it was almost completely destroyed, just like the yard. But despite this, the owner of the house still comes here to tidy up her flower bed because she believes that she will be able to rebuild her home and return here.
In 2025, Russia plans to produce 75,000 guided aerial bombs, which is 50% more than last year. Russians are literally proud that they are saturating the front line and nearby cities with Soviet aerial bombs that they have managed to modernize. But there is already information that the Ukrainian military has found a method to shoot down Russian bombs. All the details are in the following material by TSN journalist Vitaly Afanasyev.
An enemy Su-24 is circling in the sky over Donetsk region. Almost every day, Russian bombers are leveling Ukrainian cities and villages to the ground, dropping dozens of guided aerial bombs. Russian bombers make another circle and drop a 1.5-ton bomb towards Pokrovsk. It was at this moment that the Ukrainian Air Defense Forces acted ahead of the attack and shot down the bomb right over the field. Considering that enemy aircraft try to avoid entering the range of our air defense, such a shoot-down falls into the category of incredible and impossible.
There was information that they were shot down by anti-aircraft installations, including Soviet-era Su-22s. They were intercepted precisely from air defense systems, for example, the OSAI. It could have been a book. The most effective are the two systems, Patriot and NASAMS, or IRIS-T for countering bombs, as well as the operation of our attack aviation, particularly the F-16 planes. But we have very, very few of them.
There are indeed very few F-16s and Mirages for now. At the same time, shooting down relatively cheap enemy bombs with interceptor missiles from Patriot, NASAMS, or IRIS systems, completely shooting them down costs several $1 million, which is too expensive. That's why in the ISU, they are learning to hit Russian-guided aerial bombs with existing or cheaper weapons.
Automatic cannons, like the ZU for example, as well as the Tunguska, and systems like Gepard. Option number 2 is short-range missiles. Actions such as the R-73, which were installed on sea drones, shot down helicopters and targeted Russian planes. We have a program with the Americans called Franken-SAM, where Western radars and Western missiles, specifically the AIM-9 and the Sea Sparrow, which are air-to-air class, are launched from our Buk systems and from our old Soviet S-300 systems.
At the same time, one of the most effective ways to combat enemy bombers today is considered to be long-range aerial drones. Their task is to strike at the tactical aviation of the Russians while they are resting at airfields. The list of such attack birds is rapidly increasing, and the strike capabilities that are embedded in such smart drones will certainly surprise the enemy in the near future.
We're betting on jet propulsion. And the jet systems we have today can also be used against bombs and aircraft because they are not just faster, but they also come with a guidance system.
Enemy Su-34 and Su-35 bomb Ukraine mainly from a distance of up to 50 kilometers. They operate both from the state border and from the sea, so hitting planes in the sky is still not an easy task. But according to the Air Forces, last year alone, Russia dropped more than 40,000 bombs on Ukraine. That summer, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, tasked the technical units with learning how to combat guided aerial bombs. The enemy... And such a solution has been found.
And such a solution has been found because it focuses on the frontline manpads, man-portable air defense systems of short range. This is when, accordingly, a drone of the wing type rises to the large reconnaissance aircraft of the Orlan Hall, which in fact guide these drones. The wing hovers above this reconnaissance drone and actually releases an FPV drone using the force of a pneumatic shot in gravity, which detonates directly from the reconnaissance drone itself.
You can also shoot down bombs with a laser. Last year, the United Kingdom showcased its development, which it later promised to share with us. From a distance of 1 kilometer, such a laser can hit a coin with precision. The cost of a shot is only £10 sterling.
I personally spoke with the military. They still say that this is not science fiction. And this actually exists. This is our laser weapon accordingly, which could be aimed at the KB, and under the influence of this beam, roughly speaking, force it to detonate or simply deviate from its course.
All these methods of destroying Russian aircraft and shooting down their guided bombs might not have been invented if Western partners had been able to transfer a larger number of anti-aircraft missile systems to Ukraine. That would reliably secure the sky, at least along the front line. A few additional F-16s and Mirages with long-range missiles under their wings would have permanently deterred the Russians from even approaching our borders.
Well, now let's analyze the operational situation on the Huliaipol and Orikhiv fronts. The bloody terror continues. And here, on the Huliaipol front, the enemy attacked 3 times in the areas of Novopilia and Novoselki. One battle is still ongoing. The occupiers attempted to advance on the positions of Ukrainian units in the areas of Novoandriivka and Istepne 3 times, which is on the Orikhiv front. 2 clashes are still ongoing. Also, the Russian invaders once again attacked Konstantinivka the day before. At least 4 people have died. This was reported by the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, Volodymyr Filashkin. I will quote, "The city was subjected to 4 airstrikes and shelling from artillery. Currently, there are reports of 2 deceased men and 2 women. According to Filashkin, 7 private houses, 4 multi-story buildings and dormitories have been damaged. An infrastructure facility, 2 enterprises, 3 power lines, a gas pipeline, 7 garages, and 3 vehicles." And what is happening right now in the area of Kleshkivka and Andriivka will be told by military correspondent Andriy Tsaplienko.
It's already clear that the Russians are struggling to take Konstantinivka, as the military calls it. The 93rd Brigade has been holding the enemy at the line of Kleshkivka and Andriivka for several months now. Right now, all directions in Kleshkivka and Andriivka are primarily focused on infantry, and we've been told that this paladin is preparing to fire towards Russia. Cluster munitions.
Well, they're not huge, but when they hit them, you think, thank God, and it's good if they take out more of them in batches.
The battlefield is equipped for 200 or 3.
On the front line in this area, the Russians have almost no equipment. Everything big and powerful is hidden and camouflaged in the rear. However, that doesn't mean the 93rd Brigade can't reach there. But before making a shot, you need to see where to hit. And so, this nightbird called Shark quietly searches for Russian targets. Sometimes it's tens of kilometers deep from the front line. And when something more powerful inevitably arrives there,
We are operating at a depth of about 50 kilometers. In recent days, tanks, bunkers with bombers, and enemy wings have been successfully destroyed.
Ukrainian-made drones, Shark, are used to adjust strikes on Russian rear positions with long-range Western equipment, artillery, HIMARS systems, and aircraft that drop precision bombs. This entire arsenal barely holds back the Russian invasion, and for now there's no guarantee that it will be replenished with a new American president.
I have no idea how it could all end. I know that we will continue to serve until this all ends. We still have some strength left for this.
Everyone understands that the war will continue, so it's hard to say that someone is expecting something there. Well, probably not.
It is impossible to find a compromise when Putin is fundamentally not satisfied with the existence of Ukraine. And sitting in the Oval Office, it's harder to understand that than in a trench under Toretsk or Kleshkivka.
That's all for today, but very soon on the Front News program, new, unique materials from our journalists from the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. You were with Vladimir Tymoshenko. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.